Hello, everyone, and greetings of peace to you all. My name is Maggie Siddiqui, and I'm the Senior Director for Religion and Faith at the Center for American Progress. We are gathered today as a Faith for Equality coalition made up of over 120 religious organizations and over 17,000 people of faith who have expressly stated their support for LGBTQ equality. We are the faithful majority. And how do we know we represent the faithful majority? A new polling analysis, which we are releasing today from data collected by the Public Religion Research Institute's American Values Atlas, shows that the vast majority of religious Americans, 69%, support non-discrimination protections that would protect gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people in jobs, public accommodations, and housing. This data should not surprise us across the country for most people of faith, which include LGBTQ people of faith. It is a common sense demonstration of our values that we support non-discrimination protections, that we think no one should live in fear because of who they are or who they love. We cannot let the religious right continue to spread information that LGBTQ rights and religion are in conflict. We must correct the record and ensure that the public, the media, and lawmakers understand the strong and growing support for LGBTQ rights among religious Americans. Our Faithful Majority campaign is about ensuring the public and our lawmakers know the facts about religious support for LGBTQ rights. And to do this, we need your help. Tomorrow, we'll have a digital day of action, and we invite you to join us in sharing your voice. We will drop a link to a toolkit on how you can participate in the chat and also speak more about how you can participate in a few minutes. First, we'll hear from a few faith leaders who are playing a leadership role in faithful advocacy for LGBTQ equality. So to start us off with an opening prayer and reflection, I'd like to turn it over to Bishop Tanya Rawls, founder and executive director of the Freedom Center for Social Justice.
Thank you so very much. It is wonderful to be here today, and especially for this amazing occasion. When thinking about all of the varied things that people could be doing today, I'm just so excited to see the many who have come to be a part of this with us. Let us pray. God of love, who we know by many names and many more experiences, we, your children, come today praying a prayer that many before us have prayed, and that is a prayer of help and hope. We ask that you help us, Lord, in these next steps that we are taking toward justice and equality, freedom, protections. We also want to ask for increased hope for those who are feeling hopeless in light of so many of the barriers that seem to just be coming at record numbers. What we know is, because we have seen it, love will prevail. Justice will be manifested if we faint not. So we pray for your strength, your wisdom, your guidance, your direction. I pray that you prosper all those who are engaged in this work, those of us who are LGBTQ and our allies. Thank you for this opportunity. In the name of love, we pray. Amen. I was thinking, when invited to be a part of this launch of the amazing research that has just been done, wondering kind of like what voice to bring into this experience. And the thing that I thought most about, and I kept coming back to it, which is why I want to kind of do this centering reflection based on that, and that is who I am. It is difficult in times like this, when we're talking about freedom and we're talking about justice. I didn't want this to be some kind of esoteric reflection where we kind of do this whole head thing. This is about lives. This is about people and their life. I am Tanya Marie Rawls. I am the daughter of Josephine and Aristotle Rawls. I am married to Gwendolyn Iris Woodard Rawls. This year we're celebrating 23 amazing years together. And among the things that I felt was important to reflect upon is that I'm also 63 years old and an elder. I have the honor also of serving as founding pastor of Sacred Souls United Church of Christ and founder of the Freedom Center for Social Justice, both based in North Carolina, a state that, as many of you know, has been used as a testing ground for some of the most egregious laws and efforts that come against folk like me, LGBTQ people. I am also aware of the fact that so much of what is happening in the media and happening in conversations and happening over social networks are these methods of presenting information as if those of us who are people of faith have no commitment, no connection to, no settling with the LGBT community, without owning the fact that many of us are just that. When thinking of what I would share, again, as an elder, I was reminded of some of the journeys that have happened prior to this journey. I am Black, I am a woman, I am an elder, but I'm also continually encouraged by women like Abigail Adams, who on March the 31st, 1776, in a letter to her husband, one of our founding fathers, John Adams, made the following amazing plea to him and to the Continental Congress. And she said the following, she said, "Remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Do not push such unlimited power into the hands of the husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. If particular care and attention is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion and will not hold ourselves bound by any law in which we have no voice or representation." I'm also encouraged by the subsequent actions of others who fought for their rights. And this is the woman part of me coming forth. And in July 19th to the 20th, 1848, in the first Women's Rights Convention organized by women, the Seneca Falls Convention in New York had 300 attendees, 68 women and 32 men, including Frederick Douglass, signed the Declaration of Sentiments, which sparked decades of activism, eventually leading to the passage of the 19th Amendment granting women the right to vote. Somebody needs to holler out, "Fight on." I am a preacher, so that will slip in. Amen. 3 years later, on May 29th, 1851, a formerly enslaved worker turned abolitionist and women's rights activist Sojourner Truth delivered her famous "Ain't I a Woman" speech at the Women's Rights Convention in Akron, Ohio. "Ain't I a woman?" she asked. "Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man when I could get it, and bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children and seen most all sold off to slavery. And when I cried out with a mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. Ain't I a woman?" I stand on and encouraged by the boldness of these women who showed what is possible when we hold this nation accountable to its highest founding principles. We gonna fight on. In addition to being a woman, I'm also Black, as you can well see, and standing on the shoulders of those who bravely fought for our rights when thinking about December 1st, 1955, when a Black seamstress, Rosa Parks, refused to give up her seat to a white man on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. The move helped launch the Civil Rights Movement, and 9 years later, the landmark 1964 Act barring discrimination based on race, color, religion, or national origin in public facilities such as restaurants, theaters, or hotels, was passed. Discrimination in hiring practices was also outlawed. Sound familiar? And the act established the Equality Employment Opportunity Commission to help enforce the law. While that law, and thinking about the power we can glean from it, the encouragement hopefully as well, was passed, it was not strong enough, not significant enough to protect voters. And so what we see is that while the law attempted to legislate fair election practices, it was not until 1965 where the Voting Rights Act was put into place to ensure safe elections, or at least attempt to, for Black folk. And now here we are, y'all. Here we are on this 10th day of March 2022. The faithful majority ready to carry the torch forward, as many have before us in the midst of growing social and political darkness, to say that LGBTQ people, like women, like Black folk, like other marginalized groups before us, deserve equal rights and equal protection under the law. We are here to do what others have done before us, to rise up and say, no more, and not on our watch. We will no longer stand passively by and ask permission, but we demand the change that this study shows. We demand that now our senators and others align with the values of the more than 69% of people of faith have stated, that we challenge these senators to pass the long overdue Equality Act. We are not the majority, as some would have us believe. We are the majority. We're not the minority. We are not weak, but powerful beyond measure. As we look at the journey of women and Blacks, the LGBTQ movement can walk assured that trouble really won't last always. We will win, and it is important to also note that we are not alone. We are grateful for the many allies that are joining in this fight and challenge them to walk even more boldly with us and use their power, influence, and resources to help us realize the success of this and other efforts that are to come. I close in encouraging you by saying that the Equality Act shall pass, or something stronger than it, and it will pass because we won't stop fighting till freedom come and protections and access are ours. Thank you.
Amen. And thank you so much, Bishop Rawls, for grounding our conversation so powerfully today. Fight on, not on our watch. And we are not alone. I love that. I'd like to turn it next to my colleague, Guthrie Graves Fitzsimmons, Fellow for Religion and Faith at the Center for American Progress, to share new data from the Public Religion Research Institute.
Thanks so much, Maggie, and thank you, Bishop Rawls, for that centering prayer and opening. I hate to follow that those passionate words, getting us back into our headspace, since this is such a heart and issue that impacts lives. But that's what I've been tasked with doing today, is going over our new analysis of public opinion polling that we are releasing today. And I'm going to be moving through quite a bit of numbers right now, but I want to say that this data is now available publicly. I hope one of my colleagues can, since my screen is now taken up, can drop the link in to the landing page where the data I'm going to be covering is covered. Thank you so much, Rachel. And all of the data and more is available on this website. And there's actually more data that we can find, and are happy to help if there is a critical piece of data that we can help find that would be helpful in your work for advancing the faith-based fight for LGBTQ dignity. We are here to help you. So the data we are releasing today is a new analysis based on the work of the Public Religion Research Institute. And I must first say we are deeply indebted to Dr. Robbie Jones, who is the executive director of PRRI, and Dr. Natalie Jackson, the research director, who went into their data set and provided the numbers for us based on their American Values Atlas, which is over 20,000 interviews in communities all across the country, which allow us to have statistically significant data broken up by religion in every state in the country. So that is the well from which we are drawing this new data today. Rachel, can you go on to the next slide? So here's the key question that was asked in these interviews. The interviews, of course, I don't know how many of you have participated in a poll before, but they ask you a lot of different questions, but we're here to talk about this key question. Do you strongly favor, oppose, or strongly oppose laws that would protect gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people against discrimination in jobs, public accommodations, and housing? So what I want to stress here is that as we talk about this data, it's important to be specific as we are in the different graphics that are being shared as part of the Faithful Majority campaign. This is what we mean by the data we're releasing reflects the faithful majority, that the majority of religious Americans answered this question. Can we go back? Okay. The majority of religious Americans answered this question as either strongly favor or favor. And we can break down, if it's helpful for anyone, the strongly favor versus favor, but the top line message was the strongly favor plus favor response to this specific question. And we always want to be precise as we present this data. So if you go forward, if you look for this data on the PRRI website, you will not find the data we're about to present. That's on the website we're launching. They provided us this new data, but if you look on their website, what's been released before is national level data about different religious groups. So they released this kind of, and they also released state level data, but it wasn't broken down by religion. And so there was different data sets out there that they had made public. But what we wanted to do was really understand the total religious number nationally, and then the total religious number in key states. And what I mean by key states is in states that it's going to take to build a 60, super majority it takes to pass legislation in the United States Senate because of the filibuster. We're looking at states that will take those senators to pass federal non-discrimination protections that will protect LGBTQ people in jobs, public accommodations, and housing. So that's the data we went to and asked them for, and now we're happy to present it today. So nationally, 69% of religious Americans, people of faith nationally, support laws to protect LGBTQ people from discrimination. That's a really, really strong number. And it really does undercut the idea that we hear so often in the media that there's this God versus gays narrative, that religion and LGBTQ people are in conflict. And what it does is it allows all of us, 67 of us on the call right now, to go out in meetings with senators, in the media, in so many different ways. It allows us to say we are not just speaking as representatives of our own experience or our church's experience or synagogue. We are representatives of this faithful majority, 69% of religious people nationally. And then I'm going to ask Rachel to slowly, we're just going to go through the numbers state by state. And like I mentioned earlier, we also have numbers about different religious groups in states. Now, not all of them and not every religious group in every state, because even when you do 20,000 interviews nationwide, when you start breaking it up by state and religion, the numbers can get too small for it to be statistically relevant. But we do have these numbers. 66% in Iowa, people of faith in Iowa support non-discrimination protection. 71% in Indiana. 75% in Maine, where we know Senator Collins, for instance, will be critical to passing non-discrimination protections nationwide. 65% of people of faith in North Carolina. 71% in Nebraska. 70% in Ohio. We know Senator Portman in Ohio is critical to this effort to passing federal protections to protect LGBTQ people. 71% in Pennsylvania. 62% in West Virginia. And I want to reiterate, we're highlighting these specific states because we wanted to show that there's both national support and support in key states. So I'm going to stop there. Again, there is more information on the link that was shared in the chat, but that is an overview of the data we are releasing today. And now I'll turn it back over to Maggie.
Thank you so much, Guthrie. It is really exciting to have this new data, and thank you for presenting that today. I'd now like to invite a faith leader from the state of Pennsylvania to join us, Dr. Isha Khurana, board member of Sadhana Coalition of Progressive Hindus.
Hi, namaste, Hari Om. My name is Isha. It's so lovely to be here with all of you today. Found myself already so moved by the words everyone has shared and the stats. I am a physician and healer here based in Pittsburgh. I'm also a writer and of course a board member as part of Sadhana, which is a group of progressive Hindus really based all over the country. I wanted to start maybe by taking a minute to do something I realize I haven't done for my own well-being in the past week or two, which is maybe take a moment of silence. We have a concept in Hinduism called Vasudeva Kutambikam, which is this idea that the world is one family. And it feels powerful to evoke it in this moment, thinking about folks whose rights have been threatened within the LGBT community, but for me also thinking about our friends in Ukraine who are struggling right now. So if you wouldn't mind me and indulge me for a moment, I wanted to take a moment of silence. And for me, it's such an opportunity to also just connect with my breath and feel the gratitude I do feel for being here. Was thrilled to see that I'm in Pennsylvania, one of 71% of the faithful who are supporting LGBT rights. Very, very exciting. In line with Bishop Tanya's remarks, I'll share a little bit about my own story and growing up here in Pennsylvania and my journey to sadhana. I actually am a native Pennsylvanian. I grew up in Westchester, Pennsylvania. I am the daughter of Indian immigrants and the granddaughter of refugees, which is, I think, one of the reasons I feel deep sense of community with some of our Ukrainian colleagues today. My grandparents were refugees between Pakistan and India at partition way back in the dawn of Indian independence. And growing up in Westchester, I grew up in a predominantly white community, predominantly Protestant. I've been a part of a spiritual minority, and I feel so honored to be able to represent my faith today. And I'm probably a part of a deep minority in the country as well. And so I really feel so honored to be here. I also feel very relieved to hear those stats and so heartened to hear those statistics. I grew up deeply curious about interfaith work and deeply curious about gender and the ways in which we could find refuge in spirituality as we were part of growing and learning as human beings, and how gender interacts with that, especially as somebody who was really curious about healing profession. When I went to university, I found myself, the image I get is like swimming between islands in a sea, finding myself in churches, temples, Buddhist sanghas, really seeking community anywhere I could. As a healer now and a physician, I work with LGBT patients every day, and I see the consequences of the lack of rights on physical and mental well-being for those patients. I've had remarkable encounters over the past year. Some that come to mind include those with a young teen just struggling to have personal pronouns be acknowledged within the family, or everything from that to encounters with an older gay man this past year whose unemployment status was deeply threatened when his status as a gay man with HIV was revealed. It's been a tough year, of course, with COVID, and I think that's just been exacerbated for our members and allies in the LGBT community. As a Hindu, I come from a deep tradition in faith where I see faith is a powerful tool for healing and mental well-being and navigating shared trauma, like what we're seeing in Ukraine. I've seen the ways in which faith can also be used to harden and calcify ideas around gender, reinforce toxic gender dynamics. And I feel so fortunate to be part of a group of young Hindus who are questioning that every day and growing together and pushing one another to work through and to heal from those dynamics. I see faith in the eyes of friends in the LGBT community who are living beautiful lives of their creation with the support of their faith. And I feel so lucky to be part of a tradition which has for a long time played with ideas of what we call Shiva and Shakti, the masculine and the feminine, the balance of genders, but even beyond the binary gender dialectic, I think playing with gender in even more broad ways. And I'm so excited to be part of a group of people that are interested in bringing that back and having conversations about that more. The other and final thought I'll share, as I saw the statistics, the ideas around Hinduism and Buddhism, which are around change and impermanence. The idea of change being the only constant comes to mind. Those statistics just scream of the kind of change that Bishop Tanya was so passionately speaking to. The world is changing. COVID is changing our world. International dynamics are changing our world, and we are changing our world through existing and being faithful people who embrace equality in the LGBT community. And I'm so honored to be joining you all as part of that fight. So thank you all again for letting me be here. And I'm so excited to hear from the rest of those of us who feel the same way.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khurana, and thank you for your work as both a Hindu activist and as a healer. And next, I'd like to introduce the Reverend Dr. Neil Thomas, Senior Pastor of Cathedral of Hope in Dallas, Texas.
Good afternoon, and really what an honor it is to join this esteemed group of colleagues and friends, and to be excited about this poll and this new number. 69% of Americans now support non-discrimination legislation to protect our LGBTQ plus friends. And I'm excited about this. I'm in Dallas, Texas, which is a little different than some of the other places around the country. And as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not originally from Dallas. I hail from across the pond in the United Kingdom and moved to the States just over 20 years ago. I was born into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon tradition, and was raised as a faithful Mormon for the first 9 or 10 years of my life. I came out of the Mormon tradition before I came out as a gay man, but certainly by that time I was pretty well convinced that I had same-sex attraction. Didn't know what that meant at the time, but have made up for that in the years pursuant of that. Pastored a congregation on the south coast of England once I was ordained at 23. and then was moved across to Los Angeles in California, where I served for 13 years, and then now here at Cathedral of Hope for the last 7. It really is exciting to see the ways in which our culture is shifting and changing, and the way that the faithful majority, now 69%, are supporting legislation to protect LGBT people. I think that's an important marker, especially as we see a continuing decline in the religious right, who I say are neither religious or right, that they represent a nationalistic Christianity that is created a God in their own image. A God that is predominantly white, middle class, heterosexual, married, with 2.2 children and a Volvo in the garage. And I say that because that is the image that most evangelical fundamentalists tend to have of who this God is. And I'm grateful that there has been a progressive conversation that continues to raise the awareness of who this Jesus is, who this God is, and continues to promote this idea of what I believe is faithfully correct, and the faithful majority are now speaking about this God of radical inclusion, this God of radical love, radical hospitality, and of radical grace. And as a person of faith, I'm involved in social justice, not in spite of my faith, but because of my faith. And my faith commands me to do this work on behalf of many peoples, but specifically today LGBT peoples. It's important for us here in Texas, as I'm sure many of you have been reading in the news, our Attorney General, Ken Paxton, recently wrote an opinion that those who are treating non-binary and specifically transgender kids are now being accused of child abuse. And the Department of Family Services are already investigating families who are supporting their non-binary and transgender children in receiving treatment. We've had several clinics closed down recently. One large project, Genesis, has closed, that have been the predominant provider of counseling support and services to transgender kids. And one family specifically here in Dallas are now under investigation, and we are doing everything we can to support them and to use our religious voice predominantly to counter this argument and to support our transgender children. The other thing about Texas is we don't have many non-discrimination, and many people thought that marriage was the final ticket to full equality. We know that not to be true, but that's been a hard argument to help the American public understand. For instance, here in Texas, you could be married today legally. You could put a photograph of you and your spouse on your desk at work. There are no protections, so you could be fired from your employment. And if you rent accommodation here, if it's found that you are married, you could also lose your home. So you could be married one day and lose everything tomorrow. And so it's really, really important that not only we help people understand that, but that we also now capitalize on this 69% of Americans nationally across the country who are faithfully responding to this, that we need this Equality Act, we need the final protections for LGBT people. And let us not be misled. Of course, we are facing a backlash. Women's reproductive rights are under attack. There is ample evidence that if they win this, they're going to go after marriage equality. It is absolutely fundamentally important that we do this work, we do it now, and that we close this loop. As an individual, I'm proud to be a Cathedral of Hope, proud to be a program with Believe Out Loud that is an interfaith, interreligious organization that doing some of this incredible work, not just amongst Christians, but amongst people of all faiths, to raise this conversation around LGBT equality. And currently, I now serve as the first openly gay man, serving as the co-chair of Faith Forward Dallas. which is the largest progressive clergy organization working interreligiously to move social justice issues here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And it's a huge honor to be sat at the table with colleagues who share a passion. This is not just LGBT people who are speaking for LGBT people. This is LGBTQ plus allies all coming together to faithfully respond, I believe, to a rhetoric of nationalistic Christianity that has failed us, that does not serve us faithfully. And ultimately, I believe that there will be a new spirit that will move and sweep across our nation that will ultimately bring us to the promised land. So I'm excited about working with all of you. I'm excited about what we're doing. And I'm a faithful majority American. I'm glad to be one of the 69%. And with that, I'll stop.
Thank you so much, Pastor Thomas. And as you said, so many of us are here today, not in spite of our faiths, but because of them. And so I'd like to invite next to the stage Reverend Leslie Jones, founder and senior pastor of Truth and Destiny Covenant Ministries United Church of Christ, based in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Thank you. I am certainly glad to be with you today, and glad to be able to report 70% of Ohioans, believe in non-discrimination, and support non-discrimination and laws that would protect LGBTQ people. I think this is amazing. Ohio being above even the national average of 69%. So I am really hopeful. I am certainly excited, as the founder of a church. More than 19 years ago, we founded Truth and Destiny because there was a need for a place to worship for particularly LGBTQ families of color, that they could worship in the full truth of their life and be in a place where they would not be ostracized and criticized. And many of these families that founded Truth and Destiny 19 years ago were families that were strong in their faith, hailing from some of the most the evangelical and fundamental backgrounds of Church of God in Christ and Baptist, Methodist. And so I am grateful to those families who laid the foundation for a place of worship. And 19 years ago, I told them if we started the journey, that we would see change if we not only kept our faith, but if we did Jesus and justice. And so we hail ourselves as Jesus and justice people. And so I am hopeful in Ohio, because over these 19 years, we've been able to build relationships. So I have hope that we have these numbers in Ohio because of the relationships that we built with some of our most socially conservative clergy and congregations. And we allowed them to come into our world. We went into their world. I serve now as the president of the Interdenominational Ministers Alliance here of Greater Cincinnati, which is predominantly male, predominantly Black male, and pretty fundamental folks. But they elected me, an openly same gender loving woman, to be the president, to be the spokesperson, to be the person out front. And it has totally moved the needle. And I am so proud and so hopeful of those types of relationships, that it made an impact, that we could be above the national average. And I'll just close with this. To my elected officials, senators and reps in Ohio that do not support non-discrimination, I would really say that they're out of touch with their constituency and even their faith communities. Because as we can see, as people of faith believing in non-discrimination, we also elected folks to go that would support and serve and also support the things that we are concerned about. And so what I'm finding is that people are ready to go to the polls and make a difference, make a change. And so I would say to those elected officials today, get in touch with your constituents, because your constituents and your faith community, many of them are part of the faithful majority that says, non-discrimination laws should be passed, and ultimately that we support, non-discrimination for all people, and all people includes LGBTQ people. And so I am so glad to report this 70% from the state of Ohio today. And thank you for the time and the invitation to share my voice on today.
Thank you so much, Pastor Jones. And I love that friendly competition, as we'd say in my tradition. We should compete in good works. So I love that. Last but not least, let's hear from Rabbi Jared Sachs, the spiritual leader of Congregation Bet Ha'am in South Portland, Maine.
Good afternoon. As Maggie said, my name is Rabbi Jared H. Sachs. I serve as the spiritual leader of Congregation Bet Ha'am in South Portland, Maine, which is affiliated with the Union for Reform Judaism. I'm honored to be here today and to be among the 75% of Mainers of faith who support legislation to protect LGBTQ people from discrimination. When I was growing up, my parents, both public school educators, and my mom is actually here with us today, hi mom, would take my brother and me on educational family road trips. We'd drive from New Jersey to places like Gettysburg, Boston, Harper's Ferry, and Washington, D.C. On each of these trips, my parents came prepared with games for my brother and me to play in the car. We'd see how many different states' license plates we'd spot. We'd play car bingo. Now, when my husband and I travel with our 6-year-old son, there's another game we get to play. It's called Are We Protected in This State? When we drive from our home in Maine to see family in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Iowa, or South Carolina, or when we take a road trip anywhere in our country, the act of simply crossing a state line may result in a loss of non-discrimination protections because we are part of the LGBTQ plus community. Road trip games are usually fun. This one is not, because it reminds us of the simple fact that the LGBTQ community still faces discrimination in many aspects of daily life. Most states lack comprehensive non-discrimination laws that protect the LGBTQ plus community, and federal civil rights laws lack protections for sexual orientation and for gender identity. Unfortunately, recent years have shown us that it's not just a lack of protections that threatens LGBTQ plus people. In 2021 alone, more than 250 anti-LGBTQ plus bills were introduced in 31 states, with 10 states enacting such legislation last year. Last year was the deadliest year for trans and non-binary people, and particularly for transgender women of color who are targeted more than others. As a rabbi and as a practicing Reform Jew, these statistics horrify and sadden me. We can do better. Judaism teaches that each person is created b'tselem Elohim, as an image of God, and that the value of human dignity is so great that it supersedes any negative commandment, the thou shalt nots in the Torah. I advocate for non-discrimination protections for the LGBTQ plus community, like others, not in spite of my faith, but because of it. And I know countless Mainers of faith from many traditions who feel the same way. LGBTQ plus equality is a central value of Jewish tradition. There are hundreds of references in rabbinic texts dating back 2 millennia that affirm the existence of at least 6 genders. When the Torah states in Genesis 1:27 that God created the human being in God's image, male and female, God created them, the text does not mean only men and women, but rather everything in between as well. My professor and teacher, Rabbi Margaret Moores Wenig, teaches, men, women, and every possibility in between were created simultaneously. This verse is a merism, a figure of speech in which a totality is expressed by 2 contrasting parts. For example, young and old, thick and thin, near and far. To say that God only created male and female would be to say that God also only created day and night, but not dusk and dawn, since the text does not reference those times. If day and night, light and dark are merisms in the biblical text, then so too must be male and female. But beyond this understanding of gender identity through a Jewish lens, our tradition also demands that we protect the most vulnerable. Throughout our text, we're reminded time and time again to protect the widow, the orphan, and the stranger, the biblical community's most vulnerable people. We have a moral and religious obligation to extend protections to the most vulnerable today, to trans and non-binary youth, to LGBTQ+ people of color, and to every American who has to play the "Are we protected in this state?" game. I'm grateful for my Senator Angus King's co-sponsorship of the Equality Act, indicating his support for non-discrimination protections. In the past, Senator Susan Collins has supported the Equality Act and co-sponsored it, and I call on her today to do that again. She has also worked with Senators Jean Shaheen of New Hampshire and Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island to introduce bipartisan legislation to abolish discrimination against LGBTQ+ citizens during the federal jury selection process. Saving the lives of our youth is not a partisan issue. It is an issue of faith, and my faith demands that we extend protections to save the lives of our LGBTQ+ children, friends, and neighbors. Our rights should not be dependent upon where we live or where we find ourselves in this country. It's time to end the "Are we protected in this state?" game. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Sachs, and thank you for sharing your personal story there, as well as that call to action. I want to note that we are celebrating this data specifically today on the support that exists among religious Americans. We know that a national majority of all Americans supports LGBTQ equality, but too often the religious right attempts to state that this is not true for religious Americans. Well, this data tells otherwise. So in a moment, I'm going to invite Kelsey Herbert, Campaigns Director at Faith and Public Life, to share about what we can all do together as Faithful Majority. But before I turn to Kelsey, we'd like to hear from you. In the chat, please share with us, why are you proud to be a part of the Faithful Majority? Why are you proud to be a part of the majority of religious Americans who support LGBTQ equality? I already see Reverend Dr. Thomas, grateful to be among such wonderful colleagues and friends. Yep, people from across the shore too, that's right. Support for LGBTQ equality is an international phenomenon. Personally, I'm proud because one of the central values of my Muslim faith is compassion. I believe that's a value many of us share, one that leads me to believe no one should ever experience discrimination. See, Reverend Dr. Anderson says the spiritual imperative of the faithful has always been the visionary to inspire change. Oh, a lot of folks here. Ned says with other UUs, we affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Guthrie says, because I'm tired of how so many people secularize support for LGBTQ dignity. Donna says, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Absolutely. Peter says, my faith in Christ encourages me to push for the liberation of all people. This is wonderful. Painful to see faith twisted to promote bigotry. It's a great reminder that I am in the majority when I work and live surrounded by the minority. Oh, that's very difficult. Folks, there are a lot more folks I think that are continuing to contribute in the chat. So I'm going to encourage you to keep doing that here. But next, I'm going to turn it to Kelsey for our call to action. And Kelsey, please share with us also, why are you proud to be a part of the Faithful Majority?
Thank you so much, Maggie. Like Maggie shared, my name is Kelsey Herbert, and I'm the National Campaigns Director with Faith and Public Life. And I'm so proud that Faith and Public Life is a part of the Faith for Equality Coalition alongside 120 plus national, state, and local faith-based organizations that believe every person has dignity and worth. I'm also proud to be a part of the Faithful Majority, the 69% of religious Americans who believe LGBTQ people deserve protection under the law, because I believe God's love is so expansive that it includes all of us. Personally, I grew up believing that progress is inevitable. And I'm curious if anybody else believes that progress or believed that progress was inevitable at one point. Like somehow people in society just evolve and we just start doing the right thing. I heard that the moral arc of the universe bends toward justice. So I assume with just enough time, we'd see justice for our communities, that all of our needs would eventually be met one day. But over time, I've learned that progress and change weren't inevitable. This sobering reminder came in recent weeks when elected officials are attacking and endangering LGBTQ youth and families around the country. We see it most recently in Florida and Texas. I say this and reflect on this because the truth is we only get what we are organized to take. This data shows us that public opinion is shifting and there is growing support among religious communities for LGBTQ rights, but we need to continue boldly putting our beliefs, values, and faith into action to demand change, and we can't give up. We need to be active participants in bending the arc of the moral universe. It is what we are called to do. If you go to the next slide, please, Rachel. Today, we heard over and over again that religion and LGBTQ rights, today we heard over again that religion and LGBTQ rights are not in conflict. That is a myth that we have been told, fed, and it is a myth. The fact is that 69% of religious Americans support laws to protect LGBTQ people. In this tweet that Guthrie posted just a few hours before this event, he said, "We are the faithful majority and must boldly proclaim faith-based support for LGBTQ dignity." Look at the amount of retweets, likes. This screenshot was taken moments after Guthrie made this post. Our message resonates and we cannot be afraid of it. It is the truth. And as people of faith, we are called to be truth tellers. So our hope in launching this campaign is that this new data would enhance, reinvigorate, and embolden your advocacy and organizing efforts. Our personal and congregational stories, faith values, and experience can and still should be the core of our message and advocacy. We just now have numbers to back them up. So for example, when you visit a member of Congress's office about advocating for laws that protect LGBTQ people, you are no longer just speaking on your or your congregation's behalf, but you are speaking on behalf of the moral majority. And that is, the faithful majority. And that is very exciting. So I wanted to just share a few ways that you can use this data. We know so many people on this call are already doing the work, already doing the organizing and advocacy. So our hope is that you would just insert this into your work to enhance it. So we encourage you to meet with your senators. You might be saying, I've already met with my senators about a certain bill or general non-discrimination protections, but have you met with them and shared the faithful majority narrative? Have you brought faith leaders from all traditions from around your state to share that collectively you represent the faithful majority of your state? Probably not, because this is brand new data. So I encourage you to meet with your senators, use this framing to support your story, your experience, and your faith values. You can also, of course, call your senators. You can't call your senators enough. Maybe you've called them a lot already around non-discrimination protections, but you can call during our day of action tomorrow, and you can say that I'm a part of the faithful majority. I represent this percentage of people in my state that support federal non-discrimination protections. We also know that we need to be getting in the media to share this narrative and this new data. So consider publishing an op-ed, sharing your perspective, your values, your story. Let that be the core of your message, but use this new data to share a new story and to, again, share that LGBTQ equality and religion are not in conflict. You can preach and teach. So many of you are faith leaders on this call, or at least have a sphere of influence where you can share this. You can continue to share about the expansive love of God, how it encapsulates all of us and how that moves us to advocate so all of our neighbors have all that they need. And then again, it's really about, we can all be a part of shifting the narrative. We cannot be afraid to proclaim this message of truth. We can do it boldly because we have our faith, we have data, we have each other to back each other up. So I hope that you see a toolkit in the link or in the chat box. That toolkit has almost everything you need here to do all of these things. And if you need more, you can reach out to so many of us. We can put our emails in this chat and how you can be in touch, how we can help you resource what you need. But really, it's about getting this message out there. So today we were hopefully going to make calls together, but we're not going to have time to do that today. So we're going to put a link in the chat also where you can make a phone call, maybe even just after this call. With a script, it will give you the phone number of your senators to share this message. But the next slide, please. Tomorrow, someone mentioned already that we are having a digital day of action. It's a concerted effort of all the Faith for Equality Coalition members who are going to be lifting up this data, sharing the graphics, sharing sample social media, sharing their story, and using this data to support it. So you'll see in the toolkit also all the graphics from all the different states, the national graphic, but we really encourage you to participate in this day of action tomorrow. You can do that on any of the social media platforms, but and if you have folks that you want to send this toolkit to, it is meant for all of us. So use the website, use the toolkit, however you need to enhance your advocacy efforts. And I thank you all so much for being a part of this effort. I'm so energized, excited to be here with all of you, and very humbled by your witness. So I really appreciate it, and I'll pass it back to Maggie.
Thank you so much, Kelsey, for that call to action. This event was recorded and will be shared with all of you, so you can pass it along to others in your network who might be interested in joining the Faithful Majority campaign. Please join us for tomorrow's Digital Day of Action. Please call your senator right now. As soon as we hang up on this call. I pray that our nation and our world might be transformed into a place where no one lives in fear because of their sexual orientation or gender identity, a world in which we honor the inherent worth and dignity of all people. I pray that faith may not be used as an instrument in spreading hate, but rather of love and goodwill, and that our public policies reflect our shared values. Thank you all for being with us today, and we look forward to being with you online tomorrow for our Digital Day of Action. Peace be with you. Bye-bye.